Good morning, everyone. We are the Group 2 and we are here to report about media and social world.
It is said in Nick Coldry's Media Society World that media are fundamental to our sense of living in a social world. Since the beginning of modernity, media have transformed the scale on which we act as social beings. And now, in the era of digital media, media themselves are being transformed as platforms, content, and producers multiply. As we all know, media is the one responsible for delivering messages and connecting the sender to the receiver, serving as a bridge between the two. It is everywhere in our society, for it is the common tool we use to get information and to communicate with others. And as of today, there are many available forms of media that we use and have, such as the internet, television, and newspapers. Media influences and forms our society and our own attitudes, opinions, and beliefs, thus making it a powerful instrument. According to Mark Papsol's Media, Society, Culture, and You, there is a connection between media and society. The mass media and society are bound together and shape each other, meaning it is vice versa, wherein media shape society and society, particularly the social groups and institutions, also shapes and influences media. Different societies have different media systems, and the way they are set up by law influences how the society works. Pepsol 2018. And in here will come the freedom of speech and information, whether if the media is controlled by a certain government or not, that will greatly affect the structure of society. Also, we will know through media if the society is good and working. Every day, things are happening and is filled with news. People learn and get information by reading a newspaper, watching the television, listening to the radio, scrolling on different social media applications or sites, or even by just talking to others through the phone. Media plays a vital role and is very significant to the society, for it is where we can quickly get information on different subjects or current events that will mold our opinions and on how we see the world. It has a great impact on the accessibility and the quality of the information we get and use in the social world. It has an immense influence to us, especially with our thoughts on how we think, live, and act, and it creates awareness that will strengthen the society. It also connects us easier with people all around the world. It educates the society about certain topics or issues such as government, business, economy, education, health, the environment, etc., and educates the people regarding their rights and responsibilities that will eventually help in implementing laws. It is essential in our daily lives because we frequently use more than one type of media at a time. We are multitasking. For instance, we read books or magazines while listening to music, and we watch the television while scrolling through our cell phones or talking through the phone. We can do such things because of the availability of various media platforms. We cannot imagine the society or the world without media because it is deeply rooted in our lives and is the common source of information. Also, we are used to the idea of simply turning on the television and seeing what is going on in the world. We are so connected through media that it becomes a part of society. Media makes our lives simpler and easier. It depends on us on how we are going to use and process information, but we should always check the validity of the things we get on the media.
The rise of mass media. Media is derived from the Latin word medius, meaning middle. It is the different technological processes that facilitate communication between a sender and receiver. It enables social construction of reality, which is the process of actively creating meaning, which is relative to the consumer. Media is classified into four: the print medium, sound recording and film medium, broadcast media, and the digitization, internet, and mobile technologies. The print medium dates back to the 15th century when Korea created the cast metal type that made printing possible. In 1450, Johann Gutenberg converted a wine press into the first printing press with movable type, making printing more practicable. It was a physical medium, therefore difficult to distribute. Examples of products produced by the printing press include books, newspapers, and pamphlets. Sound and film. The evolution of sound recording began in 1877 when Thomas Edison developed the phonograph. In 1948, the long-playing 33 1/3 RPM record was launched by Columbia Records. It became the industry standard for 30 years. In the 1960s, cassettes made use of magnetic tape which originated from the 1920s. In the 1980s, digital sound recording began. Compact discs or CDs became the dominant format. In the 1990s, digital file formats such as MP3 allowed music to be instantly distributed on the internet and stored on MP3 players such as the iPod. In 2011, digital music outsells CDs and vinyl. Streaming audio services began, such as Spotify, Pandora, and many more. The evolution of the film medium began in 1895, when Auguste and Louis Lumière invented the cinematograph, leading to moving pictures. It was the rise of movies and cinema. In 1927, the first talking picture was created. In the 1970s, videocassette recorders or VCRs allowed people to rent movies and record TV broadcasts. In 1997, digital video disc or DVD shifted film to digital formats, along with the rise of digital cameras and related software. In the 2000s, or the 20th century, YouTube and Vimeo allowed spaces for amateur films, while Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon made commercial films available via streaming. Broadcast media. The radio was the first broadcast medium, followed by the television, introduced by the Pioneer Corporation in the 1940s. And in 1998, digital television broadcasting began. Digitization, the internet, and mobile technologies. Media content could now be created in digital form, stored in the ones and zeros of computer code. Digitization changed media production. Authors use word processors over pen, while filmmakers use digital video recording. The rise of the internet provided a global platform for the distribution of digitally based media content, and it boosted interactivity among users. A model of media and social world. The model illustrates the fundamentals of a sociological perspective on media. Media cannot be understood if seen independently from a larger social world. The four components are arbitrary, no process, circular, and multidimensional. The four components are as follows: media industry, media message, readers, technology, and the middle is the social world. The potential relationships are represented by the arrowheads. Media industry is the entire organizational structure that makes up the media, including all media personnel. It is affected by changes in technology, for example, the invention of the television. But it is also instrumental in the direction of technology, for instance, the use of computers in film animation. Media message or product is produced by the media industry. A book or a newspaper is written by an author, designed, formatted, and distributed by a publisher. The development of technology depends on how the audiences choose to use it. The social world is the center of the model. All of the social elements not included in the four main boxes are underneath the social world. For example, the role of the government, economic forces, and other non-media factors.
Media's place in society. What is media? In general, media refers to various means of communication. For example, television, radio, and the newspaper are different types of media. What is society? Society is defined as a group of people living as a community or an organized group of people for a common purpose. Roles of media in society. The word media is derived from the word medium signifying mode or carrier, which means a message can be delivered through the use of media. Kunwari, nag-abroad parents mo, makakapag-usap pa rin kayo through the use of media dahil merong Facebook, Messenger, WhatsApp, maraming iba't ibang klase ng means of communication. Media acts as a watchdog to protect public interest against malpractice and create public awareness. Media provides us information that opens our eyes from what is happening in our world. For example, COVID-19 had already spread in our country, and our government let it all happen without having any backup plan at all. Talk about being incompetent. Dahil sa media, nagkakaroon tayo ng opinions at sa opinions natin, napupuna natin yung mga pagkukulang ng gobyerno. Okay lang naman mapuna yung mga pagkukulang ng gobyerno para malaman nila kung ano yung dapat nilang ayusin. Kaso yung government natin, well, tahimik na lang ako. Media is the sword of democracy. It allows us to be more aware of world issues and be able to speak about it. For example, the election in USA where the Gen Z used the platform TikTok in order to voice out their opinions about having to change the president and to vote for blue in order to be free from Trump's neglectful and horrendous acts in the past 4 years. The importance of social relationships. We are social beings. It's in our nature to form social relationships. To reflect our fundamental need to belong, psychologist Roy Baumeister developed a theory centered around this need to belong. This theory argues that we are each born with the drive to seek, form, maintain, and protect strong social relationships. To fulfill this need, we seek relationships with those at work, at school, in our communities and religious organizations, on sports teams, in online communities, and in other social contexts. Baumeister suggests these relationships help us feel we are not alone because we belong to a social community. Depriving people of social relationships can be physically and psychologically devastating. In fact, social relationships bring very specific rewards. The rewards they bring are emotional, material, and physical health. In terms of emotional rewards, our relationships give us emotional support and encouragement in difficult times. They also give us happiness. Interacting with friends is fun, relaxing, and enjoyable because our friends entertain us. In fact, some of our most memorable and happiest times are spent in the company of close friends. Additionally, we receive material rewards from our social relationships. People we are close to can help meet our material needs for money, food, shelter, and transportation. When we feel close to someone, we tend to share these resources in times of need. Further, our social relationships bring health rewards. They actually help us stay healthy. Studies have shown that the more social relationships someone has, the greater the person's ability to fight the common cold.
One giant leap for mankind.
The noise is awesome. I think that's what makes the crowd.
The evolution of media. It is said that technology not just changes our way of living, it also widens our social circles through media. From media to mass media, to electric media, and now to the so-called new media, it is very clear and evident to see that our means to communicate evolves throughout the time. In 1954, a Canadian communication theorist, McLuhan, mentioned in his book that the media are not toys. They should not be in the hands of Mother Goose and Peter Pan executives. They can be entrusted only to the new artists because they are art forms. Media immensely affect the human condition. That is why media should be handled with utmost respect and dignity. The evolution of media has been the foundation of our communication success over the years. Transitions of the media has strongly felt by the whole world. Generations by generations, we are yet to unfold the easiest and the fastest way to communicate and disseminate informations to the mass. As of today, modern communication media allows us to have our long-distance exchanges via email, social media sites, and video streaming online. Although new media has been introduced widely, there are still people who still uses traditional media like the TV, radios, newspapers, magazine, and the likes, because it is much accessible to them and they still much prefer using them. What does media do for us? Media fulfills several basic roles in our society. Entertainment, information, education and learning, social networking, platform for self-expression, monitoring government, business, and other institutions.
Here's a brief discussion on the history of mass media and culture. Let's start with books. Back then, books were painstakingly handwritten and no two copies were exactly the same, until Johannes Gutenberg's 15th century invention of the movable type printing press that made the mass production of print media possible. Not only was it much cheaper to produce written material, but new transportation technologies also made it easier for text to reach a wide audience. It's hard to overstate the importance of Gutenberg's invention, which helped usher in massive cultural movements like the European Renaissance and the Protestant Reformation. In 1810, another German printer, Friedrich Koenig, pushed media production even further when he essentially hooked the steam engine up to a printing press, enabling the industrialization of printed media. In 1800, a hand-operated printing press could produce about 480 pages per hour, and Koenig's machine more than doubled this rate. This increased efficiency went hand in hand with the rise of the daily newspaper. The newspaper was the perfect medium for the increasingly urbanized Americans of the 19th century who could no longer get their local news merely through gossip and word of mouth. The Industrial Revolution meant that some people had more leisure time and more money, and media helped them figure out how to spend both. Media theorist Benedict Anderson has argued that newspapers also help forge a sense of national identity by treating readers across the country as part of one unified community. In the 1830s, the major daily newspapers faced a new threat from the rise of penny papers, which were low-priced broadsheets that serve as a cheaper, more sensational daily news source. They favored news of murder and adventure over the dry political news of the day. While newspapers catered to a wealthier, more educated audience, the penny press attempted to reach a wide swath of readers through cheap prices and entertaining, often scandalous stories. The penny press could be seen as the forerunner to today's gossip-hungry tabloids. In the early decades of the 20th century, the first major non-print form of mass media, radio, exploded in popularity. Radios, which were less expensive than telephones and widely available by the 1920s, had the unprecedented ability of allowing huge numbers of people to listen to the same event at the same time. Radio was a boom for advertisers, who now had access to a large and captive audience. The reach of radio also meant that the medium was able to downplay regional differences and encourage a unified sense of the American lifestyle, a lifestyle that was increasingly driven and defined by consumer purchases. This boom in consumerism put its stamp on the 1920s and also helped contribute to the Great Depression of the 1930s. The consumerist impulse drove production to unprecedented levels, but when the Depression began and consumer demand dropped dramatically, the surplus of production helped further deepen the economic crisis as more goods were being produced than could be sold. The post-World War II era in the United States was marked by prosperity and by the introduction of a seductive new form of mass communication, television. In 1946, about 17,000 televisions existed in the United States. As the United States GNP doubled in the 1950s and again in the 1960s, the American home became firmly established as a consumer unit. Broadcast television was the dominant form of mass media, and the three major networks controlled more than 90% of the news programs, live events, and sitcoms viewed by Americans. Some social critics argued that television was fostering a homogeneous conformist culture by reinforcing ideas about what normal American life looked like. But television also contributed to the counterculture of the 1960s. The Vietnam War was the nation's first televised military conflict, and nightly images of war footage and war protesters helped intensify the nation's internal conflicts. Broadcast technology, including radio and television, had such a hold on the American imagination that newspapers and other print media found themselves having to adapt to the media landscape. Print media was more durable and easily archived, and it allowed users more flexibility in terms of time. Once a person had purchased a magazine, he or she could read it whenever and wherever. Broadcast media, in contrast, usually aired programs on a fixed schedule, which allowed it to provide a sense of immediacy and fleetingness. The media world faced drastic changes once again in the 1980s and 1990s with the spread of cable television. During the early decades of television, viewers had a limited number of channels to choose from, one reason for the charge's homogeneity. Cable providers allowed viewers a wide menu of choices, including channels specifically tailored to people who wanted to watch only golf, classic films, sermons, or videos of sharks. New media technologies both spring from and cause social changes. For this reason, it can be difficult to neatly sort the evolution of media into clear causes and effects. As media historians Asa Briggs and Peter Burke note, every crucial invention came with a change in historical perspectives. Electricity altered the way people thought about time because work and play were no longer dependent on the daily rhythms of sunrise and sunset. Wireless communication collapsed distance, and the internet revolutionized the way we store and retrieve information. The contemporary media age can trace its origin back to the electrical telegraph by Samuel Morse in 1837. Thanks to the telegraph, communication was no longer linked to the physical transportation of messages. It didn't matter whether a message needed to travel 5 or 500 miles. Suddenly, information from distant places was nearly as accessible as local news, as telegraph lines began to stretch across the globe, making their own kind of World Wide Web. When the first transatlantic cable was laid in 1858, allowing nearly instantaneous communication from the United States to Europe, the London Times described it as the greatest discovery since that of Columbus, a vast enlargement given to the spur of human activity. Not long afterward, wireless communication emerged as an extension of telegraph technology. Although many 19th century inventors, including Nikola Tesla, were involved in early wireless experiments, it was Italian-born Guglielmo Marconi who is recognized as the developer of the first practical wireless radio system. Many people were fascinated by this new invention. Early radio was used for military communication, but soon, the technology entered the home. The interest in radio inspired hundreds of applications for broadcasting licenses from newspapers and other news outlets, retail stores, schools, and even cities. In addition to the breakthroughs in audio broadcasting, inventors in the 1800s made significant advances in visual media. The 19th century development of photographic technologies would lead to the later innovations of cinema and television. As with wireless technology, several inventors independently created a form of photography, and at the same time, among them, the French inventors Joseph Niepce and Louis Daguerre, and the British scientist William Henry Fox Talbot. In the United States, George Eastman developed the Kodak camera in 1888, anticipating that Americans would welcome an inexpensive, easy-to-use camera into their homes as they had with radio and telephone. Moving pictures were first seen around the turn of the century, with the first U.S. projection hall opening in Pittsburgh in 1905. By the 1920s, Hollywood had already created its first stars, most notably Charlie Chaplin, and by the end of the 1930s, Americans were watching color films with full sound, including Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. In 1969, management consultant Peter Drucker predicted that the next major technological innovation would be an electronic appliance that would revolutionize the way people live just as truly as Thomas Edison's light bulb had. This appliance would sell for less than a television set and be capable of being plugged in whenever there is electricity and giving immediate access to all the information needed for schoolwork from first grade to college. Although Drucker may have underestimated the cost of this hypothetical machine, he was prescient about the effect these machines or personal computers and the internet would have on education, social relationships, and the culture at large. The inventions of random access memory or RAM chips and microprocessors in the 1970s were important steps to the internet age. As Briggs and Burke note, these advances meant that hundreds of thousands of components could be carried on a microprocessor. The reduction of many different kinds of content to digitally stored information meant that print, film, recording, radio and television, and all forms of telecommunications were now being thought of increasingly as part of one complex. Let's look at the development of mass media here in the Philippines. Baybayin or Alebata is a pre-Hispanic Philippine writing system that originated from the Javanese script Old Kawi. The writing system is a member of the Brahmic family and is believed to be in use as early as the 14th century. It continued to be in use during the Spanish colonization of the Philippines up until the late 19th century. The term baybayin literally means spelling. Closely related scripts are Hanuno, Buhid, and Tagbanwa. This is where Philippines was introduced to books, magazines, and newspapers like La Solidaridad by the Spaniards who colonized the Philippines for about 333 years. When the Filipinos got the freedom, the Americans then taught English language and other forms of media like newspapers. On the other hand, the Japanese put media run under tight control until the country was liberated from the Japanese rule. Hand tools and power-driven machines are starting to develop in this age. The printing press spread within several decades to over 200 cities in a dozen European countries. In the 16th century, with presses spreading further afield, their output rose tenfold to an estimated 150 to 200 million copies. The operation of a press became synonymous with the enterprise of printing and lent its name to a new branch of media, called the press. American colonization left a mark on the press and shaped its style, a florid lingua, a neutral attitude paired with the contribution of opinionated and popular columnists. Asia's first radio stations were found back then, possible as the Philippine broadcast media was not owned or tightly controlled by the government as it was all over the rest of the continent. The cinematography film camera and projector invented by the Lumiere brothers came through the Spanish soldier named Carlo Naquera. Naquera showed several Spanish-language films to selected audiences in 1987. In the American colonial, imported films from America were shown in the early theaters in Manila during the early 1900s. They believed that film is a universal and powerful medium of information and communication dissemination. Ferdinand Marcos ordered the closure of all newspapers and broadcasting stations when he declared martial law and abolished Congress in 1972. He wanted to deprive media oligarchs from power, hold journalists and publishers off to prison. And when some newspaper outlets reopened under strict government supervision, media was owned by either Marcos' relatives or friends or his cronies. Broadcasts or storage media that take advantage of electronic technology. They may include television, radio, internet, fax, CD-ROMs, DVD, and any other medium that requires electricity or digital encoding of information. The term electronic media is often used in contrast with print media. Benji Tan, who was working for Comnet, a company that supplied Cisco routers to the PhilNet project, established the Philippines' first connection to the internet at a PLDT network center in Makati City. Shortly thereafter, he posted a short message to the Usenet news group soc.culture.filipino to alert Filipinos overseas that a link had been made. and as of March 29, 1994 at 1:15 a.m. Philippine time, unfortunately 2 days late due to slight technical difficulties, the Philippines is now connected. During the information age, the digital industry creates a knowledge-based society surrounded by a high-tech global economy that spans over its influence on how the manufacturing throughout and the service sector operate in an efficient and convenient way. Therefore, this evolution of technology in daily life and social organization has led to the fact that the modernization of information and communication processes has become the driving force of social evolution. This is the end of my report.
Gerald, please help us.
Randy, what happened?
Our house, it has no internet.
Oh my God!
We've got nothing. It's just gone.
Come in. You can use our internet until you figure out what to do.
Thank you, Gerald.
I'm getting on it first.
Oh, no, you're not.
Well, socialization from a social work perspective is how individuals begin to normalize the culture, norms, and values of the society in which they're a part of.
In other words, socialization helps individuals develop their human potential and learn patterns of their culture and society.
Let me broaden the definition of media, okay?
Okay.
And I think what you have to think about is the wide range of media that children are exposed to, and look across that wide range to see both positive and possibly negative. Children's storybooks. Almost all children's stories are meant to have a positive influence. Even the scary stories, Goosebumps, and other stories like that, are meant to have a positive influence with children in the end, that children can face their fears, that they can laugh at their fears. So books are an influence on children, especially if the books are being read to them by an adult before they take on the role of reading for themselves. Another positive influence could be whatever they're doing with their cell phones. And in fact, it gives, I have mixed feelings about cell phones and text messaging and talking on the phones and connecting to the internet on the phones. I have very mixed feelings about how that pre-adolescence is very much influenced by gossip and bad things that people say about their friends or bad things that they may say about them, the influence of bullying. I'm very concerned about that. But that's a media, of course, right there. A medium, I suppose I should say, rather than a media. But the internet has got to be considered. And if you have something like the internet and kids have access to it either on their phones or on their personal computers or on mommy's laptop or whatever it is, they can go to YouTube and they can look stuff up and they can learn. They can then talk about that at school or talk about that with their friends. I think in general, those things are important and present and influencing kids down to a very young age.
Do you believe the media can be a powerful teacher to children and young adults? If so, in what ways? Do you believe the media can be a powerful teacher to children and young adults? If so, in what ways? Yes, Angelica.
I believe to a certain extent the media can help children learn. Like Nick Jr. or Disney Channel, we have shows where they actually help the kids learn their colors. However, cartoons anymore. They're being advanced and disrespectful with it.
Yes, I believe the media can be a very powerful teacher to our children, both positively and negatively, depending on obviously what they're listening to. If they're on, if you're referring to YouTube or something like that, or anything on the internet, they can hear whatever they want, right? So, it could be a powerful teacher, both positively and negatively.
Well, I think some of the positive aspects that the media has been able to do is, particularly with the Black Lives Matters movement, the social justice issues that young people are taking up, and just being able to see those types of activities unfold in the media really, in my opinion, helps to mobilize others to be involved in issues of social justice.
Media teach children more of a, what should I say? I don't want to say socialist thing, but they teach more of a you need to have, or you should have, as far as toys, clothes, sneakers, latest this, the latest that. Media pushes that on them. You should look like this, you should wear this, you need this to be famous, or you need this to be popular. Whereas media should be telling you what you should be learning as far as developing your skills, being an individual.
The mass media have become a major necessity in our society today. The internet, cell phones, and other sorts of technology are needed for human beings to function on a daily basis. According to the article Sociology, Understanding and Changing the Social World, there are 5 agents of socialization, and the media are one of the major 5 agents of socialization that affects children and young adults.
Media and the Social World is presented to you by Ignacio, Javier, Revillame, Salazar, Sobrevinas, Vinarao and Salera. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again. Goodbye!